For me, to be an architect is to think constantly about death. It's to know that what we build today will likely outlive us. It will house a community far in the future, one we cannot know, who will never know. I know that isn't always the opinion of architects. Often architecture is talked about as really a non-essential cost, that architects are driven by their own ego and the construction of monuments to themselves. Maybe these are some examples. They want to build their dreams, not our dreams. But what is the cost of not having architecture that's built for us and for our families? What is the cost to our lives today if we fail to consider the impacts of our future built world, the one we can't fully inhabit? During my first final exams in architecture school, I was thrown face first into this very question. I was up for 3 nights straight. It's always the narrative of architects working all the time. That kind of frenetic work where I didn't even check my phone. Can you believe it? When I finally did look after 3 days, I had seen that I had missed about 30 phone calls, all of them unanswered, and all of them from my mother with increasing frequency. I know, it might be funny, it might not be uncommon, but actually I realized it was something really problematic. I kind of collapsed down into the school lobby. I knew that something horrible had happened. You see, because a year before, my father had been diagnosed with an extreme form of cancer, and he had been fighting it. But it had returned, and he had now gone into septic shock. My mother was in an ambulance calling frantically en route to New York City to save his life. "You might not see him again," she said in the first voicemail. "Get here as soon as you can," she said in the second. But what was in voicemail number 20, I thought? What was in 30? Had he died while I had been sitting there being humiliated by a group of senior architects? It was a horrifying thought. And just then, as I was sitting there thinking about this, a family friend showed up right in the lobby. She had also been calling me, and she was there to drive me to New York City. He was alive, but barely. And so we left that minute, even without packing. When we got to this building, we had heard how famous the cancer care was, and we had great hope that he would survive. But as we approached, I couldn't help but feel a sense of doom surround me. Was this impenetrable fortress the final resting place for his life, I thought? We lived off of this hallway for the next 3 weeks, a hallway that you can't see here, but it should be there. And we were here through the holidays, and at this very time, a number of years ago, and I saw his hope waver. For exercise, he was told to walk around this interior floor plate in loops a number of times to keep his blood moving. You'll notice there were no windows to look out of. The walls seemed designed to protect against medical equipment banging into them, and the floors to make insufferable noises even louder. This building may have prolonged his life, but it didn't seem to think about nourishing it. It was, I thought, devoid of design. All of the things that we were taught about the beauty of architecture. Where was the beauty when my father faced his own demise? It was, I thought, the cost of not having design. It was the price of indignity. When my father finally did leave, now with a clear expiration date in the future, I had one thought in my head, and that was, if I was to become an architect, I had to design a hospital. I found a chance to do that sooner than I may have even dreamed. At school, I had gone to a lecture by this amazing man, Dr. Paul Farmer, a leading health advocate for the global poor. And in his talk, he said something profound. He said, buildings are making people sicker. And for the poorest in the world, it is having epidemic-level problems. In this hospital, in this hallway, he said in South Africa, patients who walked in with, say, a broken leg left with an extremely drug-resistant strand of tuberculosis. Simple designs for infection control, like airflow and windows, had not been considered, he told me, and people had died because of it. Where are the architects, he said. If buildings are making people sicker, where are the architects who can come and make buildings that allow us to heal? That following summer, a few classmates and I moved into a rural village in the mountainous hillsides of Rwanda. For the next year, we lived in this town called Butaro, And we stayed in a dormitory, which you can see here, which had been used as a jail during the genocide. We were there to design a new medical facility with Dr. Farmer and his team. We were young, we were outsiders, but we applied ourselves to questions that had been neglected or taken for granted, and we searched for new answers. Like, if hallways are making patients sicker, what if we turned the hospital inside out and made people walk in the exterior? If mechanical systems rarely work, what if we could make a facility that could breathe just through natural ventilation? And what about the patient's experience? Evidence shows that a simple view of a window can radically improve health outcomes, so what if we could make a hospital where every patient had a window with a view? Simple, site-specific designs can make a building that heals, we thought. I found something else out on this hill, that designing a medical facility that heals is one thing, but getting it built is quite another. This is me at that time. When we were building the Butaro Hospital, I trained under this amazing man, this brilliant engineer. His name is Bruce Nizet. And he taught me about construction quite differently than I had learned in school. When we had to excavate a hill, for example, and a bulldozer was expensive and hard to get to site, Bruce suggested doing it by hand, using a process in Rwanda called ubudehe, which translates roughly to community works for the community. Hundreds of people came to this site with their own shovels, their own hoes, and we excavated that hill in half the time and in half the cost of that bulldozer. Instead of importing furniture, Bruce started a guild, bringing in master carpenters to train others in how to make furniture by hand. And on this project site, only 15 years after the horrific Rwandan genocide, Bruce insisted that we hire people from all ethnic backgrounds, and that half of them be women. If Dr. Farmer had taught me that buildings can heal, Bruce had taught me that building processes can heal. And not just for those who are sick, but for us, the entire community, for all of us. Using this local way of building, even formal and aesthetic decisions can transform people's lives. In Butaro, we chose to use this local volcanic rock, often considered a nuisance by farmers and piled on the side of the road, sometimes for free. We worked with masons to hand cut these stones and form them into the walls of the medical facility. And when they began at this very corner that you can see, by the time they wrapped around this whole building, they were so good at cutting these stones and putting them together, they asked if they could take down the original wall and rebuild it. We said, if you do it quickly. But you can see what is possible. It is a thing of beauty. But I think about this, the beauty to me comes from the fact that I know that hands cut each and every one of these stones. They formed them into this thick wall, made only in this place with rocks from this soil. It made me think, what if every building that we encountered, that we inhabit, we asked not just what its environmental footprint was, but what was the human handprint of those who made it? We took this local fabrication philosophy and we started a practice asking, what more can architecture do? MASS, which stands for a model of architecture that serves society, is a collective of like-minded designers who are committed to the idea that our built environment changes who we are and can improve the lives that we have. We tested this around the world, like in the dense urban condition of post-earthquake Haiti. After the earthquake in 2011 and subsequent cholera outbreak, emergency shelters were necessary and to house hundreds of thousands of displaced people. But before long, these tents revealed deep structural issues. Haitians needed shelter, but they also needed long-term, permanent healthcare facilities. A doctor had heard about our work in Rwanda and asked if we could design a new medical center in Port-au-Prince to help reduce patient-to-doctor infection rates of multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis, that same disease that we had encountered in Rwanda. In this center, where all the patients have the disease, our research showed a different risk pathway, this time not to other patients, but to nurses and doctors and janitorial staff. We designed a simple layout of rooms and hallways that allowed for an open-air consultation between doctors and patients, really a better scenario for protection. And we added a simple extra door to the bathroom from the hallway, which protected cleaning staff from the most infectious patients in their rooms. In this facility, we're seeing much better adherence to the intensive drug regimen required to treat TB. Infection rates are down, and personal protective equipment adherence is up. But maybe the most striking outcome is this one. When the clinic was still in these fabric tents behind barbed wire, patients who took these drugs would often have terrible psychotic reactions like extreme anxiety and even hallucinations. Attempted suicide in this camp was incredibly common. In our new facility, doctors told us how much the design has calmed these patients and how attempted suicide rates have dropped to 0. Our bodies and our minds are so influenced by the spaces that we design, that we inhabit. If we strive to design for the dignity of all individuals, we may find outcomes that we had never dreamed of, and this is the case in Port-au-Prince. There is another way that architecture can heal, and that is in creating spaces for our traumas to find a resting place. Rwanda, as a country, has committed to this. They have built hundreds of memorials around their country over 20 years, and they track genocide ideology, and it is radically down, creating more resilience in their communities, reducing the conversations around ethnic difference. But these successful lessons of Rwanda are not shared by all. And of course, today, intolerance and ideological divisions are on the rise around our world, in our country, dividing our communities, making us adversaries. In London, a new project speaks directly to the need for architecture to fight intolerance, the commission for a new national memorial to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. With architect John McCaslin and landscape architect Lily Jenks, we have designed a memorial that seeks to think about a more tolerant future and reveal the invisible strands that keep us apart. Our idea begins with the stone. In Jewish tradition, when someone dies, family members come and place pebbles, stones, atop their grave sites. This honors their loved ones. It binds generations together. The word for stone in Hebrew also has rich meaning. Pronounced even, when you split the words, it actually makes up 2 words, Av and Ben, which translate to father and son. The stone's name carries within it one of the most beautiful thoughts, and that is continuity between one generation and the next. The centerpiece of our project, then, is a pile of 6 million stones at the center of London, one each for the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust. But instead of merely reflecting upon this enormous pile of stone, we will actually invite visitors to take a stone, take it home with them. This act and choice to take allows them to participate in the fight against intolerance in all its forms. In this way, each stone begins a new journey, its own diaspora, into homes and schools and into families to educate and act as a physical reminder of that very pledge. And then eventually, after 10 years, the pile will diminish. Proof, evidence that 6 million hands have chosen to join this fight. And when it disappears, what remains is a space of healing in the center of London, inscribed with the traces of these very stones, these traces of these very lives. In America, of course, we have not committed to these spaces, and there is much trauma to overcome. Recently, at an opening, 2 women came up to me, and they shared with me the stories of their own sons who were taken by gun violence. They expressed the need for a space to commemorate their lives and all those dying of this national epidemic. I came back completely transformed by this idea. The artist Hank Willis Thomas, a good friend of ours, joined us on this venture, and we've proposed our newest project, a national memorial for gun violence, to gun violence, which seeks to pay tribute to the lives lost and give space for us as a nation to change our narrative around this epidemic. So to begin this memorial, it actually begins with a grassroots campaign, which we will start in the coming year. We create a national conversation asking any victim to reach out to us. And if they do, we'll send them a glass box. And in that box, they would contribute an artifact, a token, a memory of their loved ones. We would gather those artifacts, and then we will cast them into a permanent, single glass brick. The result then is we'll use those bricks and construct these glass houses, these haunting structures of our hopes and our nightmares, structures of vulnerability and fragility, but standing as beacons of memory and as transformation. In this work, I'm not naive to imagine that memorials will end gun violence, But I have been convinced that without spatializing these figures, without giving them name and location and physical dimension, we cannot fully lay our burdens down. We cannot fully heal from these traumas, and without healing, more injustice is certainly in our future. My father did eventually succumb to cancer. What was a 3-month death sentence had become a gift of 2.5 years together. Here, seen a month before his death, he said goodbye to his closest friends in our home, and he spoke about his lifetime's work in civil service and all of the unfinished projects he was proud to advance and to fight for. I felt standing there that he was passing the baton, handing me a stone. Buildings make us think about legacy and future, our lives, something we would like to see. In this way, buildings are not simply expressive sculptures. They make visible our personal and our collective aspirations as a society. Architecture is just one remnant we leave behind. It can give us fuel. It can give us hope. It can help us overcome loss and lay our burdens to rest. It can pass the baton. It is architecture that has opened up a way for me to see the world anew, not as sculptures to genius, but as many batons left for us from generations before. It is architecture that every day allows me to heal from loss. Thank you very much.